In the quiet town of Meadowbrook, Oregon, a mysterious 8-year-old girl with dirt-stained hands and eyes that held secrets beyond her years approached a broken-down Porsche on Main Street and whispered 3 words that would change everything. "I can fix that." Within minutes, she had the luxury engine purring like new, stunning the wealthy owner and every witness with mechanical skills that seemed impossible for a child. But this little girl, who called herself Emma, was harboring the most shocking secret of all. She was the missing daughter of billionaire tech mogul Victoria Cross, who had been desperately searching for her for 6 months, never knowing that her child had been hiding in plain sight, fixing cars and stealing hearts in a small town that had become her sanctuary from a life of privilege that had left her feeling more broken than any machine she could repair. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The morning mist clung to the Douglas fir trees that surrounded Meadowbrook like protective guardians, their branches heavy with the previous night's rain. Main Street stretched through the heart of the town like a well-worn ribbon, lined with modest storefronts that had weathered decades of Oregon seasons. The aroma of fresh coffee drifted from Betty's Corner Cafe, mixing with the crisp mountain air that carried hints of pine and approaching autumn. Jake Fisher stood beneath the faded sign of Fisher's Auto Repair, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag while surveying the quiet street. At 35, he carried the lean build of a man who'd spent years wrestling with stubborn engines, and the weathered face of someone who'd learned that life rarely went according to plan. His garage sat between Miller's hardware store and the town's small post office, occupying a corner lot that his father had purchased 30 years earlier with dreams of building something lasting. "Dad, Mrs. Henderson's car is making that noise again," Sophia called from inside the garage, her 12-year-old voice carrying the exasperated tone of someone far older. She emerged from behind a lifted sedan, her long brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and her clothes already showing signs of her morning spent helping in the shop. Jake smiled at his daughter, feeling the familiar mix of pride and concern that filled his chest whenever he watched her navigate the world with such determined independence. Sophia had inherited more than just her mother's striking features. She possessed an intuitive understanding of machinery that sometimes startled even Jake. More importantly, she had developed a fierce protective instinct toward anyone she deemed vulnerable, a trait that had emerged more prominently since her mother's departure 2 years earlier. "Which noise?" Jake asked, moving toward the sedan. "The grinding from the brake pads or the whining from the transmission?" "Both," Sophia replied with a grimace. "Plus something new that sounds like a cat being strangled, but only when she turns left." The morning routine at Fisher's Auto Repair followed a rhythm established through years of necessity rather than choice. Jake had inherited the business from his father Frank, who had built it from nothing during the 1980s when Meadowbrook was little more than a logging town struggling to reinvent itself. Now, 3 decades later, the town had found its identity as a haven for families seeking refuge from the chaos of larger cities, though economic stability remained as elusive as morning fog. Jake's customers reflected Meadowbrook's modest reality: teachers driving 10-year-old Hondas, retirees nursing ancient pickup trucks through one more winter, young families stretching every dollar to keep their vehicles running safely. He charged fair prices because he understood the weight of unexpected expenses on tight budgets, often accepting payment plans or bartering services when cash ran short. "Mr. Fisher?" The voice belonged to elderly Mrs. Elena Booth, who appeared in the doorway carrying a covered dish that undoubtedly contained something delicious. At 67, Elena had appointed herself the unofficial grandmother of Meadowbrook's children, a role she embraced with the enthusiasm of someone who had never been blessed with grandchildren of her own. "Good morning, Mrs. Booth," Jake replied, accepting the dish with genuine gratitude. "You didn't need to bring anything." "Nonsense," Elena waved dismissively. "Sophia's growing like a weed, and you work too hard to remember proper meals. It's chicken casserole, and there's enough for several days." Sophia appeared at Jake's shoulder, already eyeing the covered dish with obvious interest. "Did you put those crispy onions on top?" "Of course, dear," Elena beamed. "I know they're your favorite." The easy warmth of the exchange reflected the broader character of Meadowbrook, where neighbors still looked after one another, and kindness flowed as naturally as the creeks that wound through the surrounding hills. It was the kind of place where people knew each other's stories, shared each other's burdens, and celebrated small victories with genuine joy. Jake was setting Mrs. Booth's casserole inside the office when the low rumble of an expensive engine drew his attention back to Main Street. A sleek black Porsche 911 had pulled to the curb directly in front of his garage, its polished surface reflecting the morning light like dark water. The car looked as out of place in Meadowbrook as a tuxedo at a barn raising. The driver emerged slowly, and Jake immediately recognized the type. Wealthy, probably from Seattle or Portland, wearing clothes that cost more than most people in Meadowbrook earned in a month. The man appeared to be in his late 40s, with silver-touched hair and the kind of confident bearing that suggested he was accustomed to having problems solved quickly and expensively. "Excuse me," the man called, approaching the garage with measured steps. "I'm having some trouble with my car. The engine seems to be losing power, and there's an unusual sound when I accelerate." Jake nodded politely, though he couldn't help noticing the man's obvious reluctance to bring his expensive vehicle to such a modest establishment. "I can take a look. When did you first notice the problem?" "About 20 miles back," the man replied, glancing around the garage with barely concealed skepticism. "I was hoping to make it to Portland, but the situation seems to be worsening." Sophia had emerged from behind the sedan, her curiosity clearly piqued by the unusual visitor. She studied the Porsche with the analytical gaze of someone who appreciated fine machinery, regardless of her family's economic circumstances. "That's a beautiful car," she said simply, approaching with the fearless directness that characterized her interactions with the world. The man's expression softened slightly at Sophia's genuine admiration. "Thank you. It's been very reliable until today." Jake popped the hood and immediately identified several potential issues. The air filter was dirty, the fuel injectors needed cleaning, and one of the ignition coils showed signs of failure. None of the problems were particularly complex, but they would require careful attention to restore the engine's performance. "I can fix this," Jake said after several minutes of examination, "but it'll take most of the day. The parts aren't expensive, but I'll need to order one component from Portland." The man frowned, clearly unhappy with the delay. "How much will it cost?" "Parts and labor, probably around $300, Jake replied honestly. The quoted price seemed to surprise the man, who had apparently expected something much higher. "Are you certain that will cover everything?" "I don't quote prices I can't honor," Jake said simply. It was then that Jake noticed the small figure approaching from the direction of Riverside Park. A little girl, perhaps 8 years old, walked with the deliberate pace of someone on a mission. Her clothes were clean but well worn, and her dark hair hung in somewhat tangled waves around a face that held an unusual seriousness for someone so young. Sophia spotted the approaching child at the same moment and moved instinctively toward the front of the garage. "Hey there," she called gently. "Are you okay?" The little girl paused, studying Sophia with intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog every detail before deciding whether to trust this older child. "I'm fine," she replied in a voice that carried surprising steadiness. "I heard the car engine. It sounds sick." Jake and the Porsche's owner both turned to look at the child, who had moved closer to examine the vehicle with obvious interest. Her focus was entirely on the mechanical problem, showing none of the hesitation that most children would display around strangers in expensive cars. "It's nothing too serious," Jake assured her kindly. "Just needs some attention." The little girl nodded thoughtfully, then moved closer to peer into the engine compartment. Her examination was methodical and thorough, far more sophisticated than Jake would have expected from someone her age. "The third cylinder isn't firing properly," she said after a moment, her voice matter-of-fact. "And the fuel mixture is too lean because the air filter is restricting flow." Jake stared at the child in amazement while the Porsche's owner looked completely bewildered. Sophia's eyes widened with genuine excitement at meeting someone her own age who shared her mechanical interests. "How did you know that?" Jake asked gently. The little girl shrugged, as if precise automotive diagnosis was the most natural thing in the world. "I can hear it in the engine rhythm. Plus, you can see the carbon buildup on the spark plug wires." Jake looked more closely and realized the child was absolutely correct on both counts. Her assessment was not only accurate but demonstrated a level of mechanical understanding that would be impressive in an adult, let alone a 8-year-old. "What's your name?" Sophia asked, moving closer with obvious fascination. "Emma," the little girl replied simply. "Emma Bailey." The surname meant nothing to Jake, and he was certain he'd never seen the child before in Meadowbrook. Given the town's small size, that was unusual enough to raise questions. But Emma's remarkable mechanical knowledge was far more intriguing than her unfamiliar face. "Where do you live, Emma?" Jake asked gently. Emma's expression grew guarded, and she took a small step backward. "Around," she said vaguely. "I move around a lot." The answer raised more questions than it answered. But Jake sensed that pushing for details would only cause the child to retreat further. Instead, he focused on her obvious interest in the automotive problem at hand. "Would you like to help me fix it?" he offered. Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile Jake had seen from her. "Really? You'd let me help?" "If you know as much as you seem to, I'd be grateful for the assistance," Jake replied honestly. The Porsche's owner looked increasingly confused by the turn of events, but Emma was already moving toward the toolbox with purposeful strides. She selected a socket wrench with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, then began working on the spark plug connections with steady, practiced movements. Sophia watched in fascination as Emma demonstrated techniques that would have challenged much older students. The little girl's hands moved with surgical precision, and her understanding of the engine's systems was clearly both comprehensive and intuitive. "How long have you been working on cars?" Sophia asked. "Since I was really little," Emma replied without looking up from her work. "My granddad taught me. He said understanding machines helps you understand how things work together." Jake noticed that Emma spoke about her grandfather in the past tense, suggesting another loss in what was clearly a complicated young life. He also observed that despite her obvious skill and knowledge, Emma worked with the careful intensity of someone who desperately wanted to prove her worth. Within 30 minutes, Emma had identified and addressed each of the engine's problems with an efficiency that left Jake genuinely impressed. Her diagnosis had been completely accurate, her repair techniques were sound, and her understanding of automotive systems was remarkably sophisticated. "Try starting it now," Emma told the Porsche's owner, stepping back from the engine with obvious satisfaction. The man turned the key, and the engine immediately roared to life with smooth, powerful precision. The rough idle was gone, the power loss had been corrected, and the vehicle now ran with the refined efficiency that its German engineers had intended. "That's incredible," the man said, clearly amazed. "How did you learn to do that?" Emma shrugged again. But Jake could see the pride in her eyes. "Engines want to run correctly. You just have to listen to what they're telling you and give them what they need." The simple wisdom of her explanation struck Jake as profound. Emma had not only demonstrated remarkable technical skill, but had articulated a philosophy about problem-solving that reflected deep understanding and genuine care. "What do I owe you?" the man asked, reaching for his wallet. "Nothing," Jake replied. "Emma did most of the work and it didn't take very long." "But surely something," the man insisted, clearly uncomfortable with accepting such valuable service without payment. Emma looked up at him with serious eyes. "Maybe you could buy lunch for everyone. I haven't eaten since yesterday." The casual admission that she hadn't eaten in 24 hours hit Jake like a physical blow. Emma's matter-of-fact delivery made it clear that missing meals was not unusual for her, which raised alarming questions about her living situation and general welfare. Sophia immediately moved closer to Emma, her protective instincts fully engaged. "Dad, can Emma stay for lunch? Mrs. Booth brought that casserole, and there's plenty," Jake nodded without hesitation. "Of course. Emma, would you like to join us?" The little girl's face showed a mixture of gratitude and wariness, as if she'd learned to be cautious about accepting kindness. "Are you sure? I don't want to be any trouble." "No trouble at all," Jake assured her. "Anyone who can fix a Porsche that well has definitely earned a meal." The Porsche's owner reached into his wallet and extracted several $20 bills. "Please, let me contribute something. What that young lady accomplished was extraordinary." Jake accepted the money, intending to use it to buy Emma some necessities rather than keeping it as payment. Something about the child's situation was clearly not right, and he was determined to learn more about her circumstances while ensuring she received proper care. As the man drove away in his perfectly running Porsche, Jake found himself studying Emma with growing concern and curiosity. Her mechanical abilities were undeniable, but her obvious hunger and vague answers about her living situation suggested serious problems that went far beyond automotive repair. Sophia had already appointed herself Emma's guide and protector, leading the younger girl toward the garage's small office where they kept a mini refrigerator and microwave. Emma followed with the careful steps of someone who had learned not to take safety and comfort for granted. "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" Jake asked gently as they prepared to heat up Mrs. Booth's casserole. Emma's pause was telling. "I'll figure something out. I always do." The response confirmed Jake's suspicions that Emma was essentially homeless, surviving through a combination of resourcefulness and luck that no 8-year-old should have to rely upon. Her remarkable mechanical skills had apparently helped her find temporary shelter and occasional meals, but she was clearly living in an extremely precarious situation. Sophia caught her father's eye and nodded slightly, communicating without words that she understood the gravity of Emma's circumstances. Despite her own youth, Sophia had developed a mature awareness of life's hardships and an instinctive desire to help those in need. As they sat down to share Mrs. Booth's casserole, Jake made a decision that would change all of their lives. Whatever Emma's story might be, whatever circumstances had brought her to Meadowbrook, she would not spend another night hungry or homeless while he had the ability to help. The afternoon sun slanted through the garage windows, casting long shadows across tools and equipment that suddenly seemed less important than the vulnerable child who had wandered into their lives with nothing but remarkable skills and desperate need. Emma ate with the focused intensity of someone who understood that meals were precious and uncertain, while Sophia chattered about school and friends and all the ordinary concerns of childhood that Emma had apparently been denied. Jake watched them both, already planning how to ensure Emma's safety while respecting her obvious independence and dignity. He had no idea that this decision would soon connect him to a story of loss and searching that stretched far beyond Meadowbrook's quiet streets, or that the little girl sharing lunch in his modest garage was about to transform not only his life, but the lives of people he had never met in ways he could never have imagined. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The evening air carried the scent of wood smoke from chimneys throughout Meadowbrook as Jake finished closing the garage for the day. Emma had spent the afternoon demonstrating an encyclopedic knowledge of automotive systems that left both Jake and Sophia genuinely amazed. She could identify engine problems by sound alone, understood complex electrical systems with intuitive ease, and possessed a mechanical vocabulary that rivaled many professional technicians. "Where did you learn about fuel injection timing?" Sophia asked as they watched Emma adjust the idle speed on Mrs. Henderson's sedan with the precision of a master mechanic. Emma paused in her work, a shadow crossing her face. "My granddad had a big workshop. He said understanding how things work helps you fix what's broken. Not just in machines, but in people too." The wistful tone in which she spoke about her grandfather suggested deep affection, tempered by loss. Jake noticed that Emma consistently spoke about her family in the past tense, carefully avoiding any details about her current circumstances or how she had come to be alone in Meadowbrook. "Is your granddad why you know so much about cars?" Jake asked gently, hoping to encourage Emma to share more about her background without seeming intrusive. "He taught me everything," Emma replied, her voice growing quieter. "He said I had special hands for fixing things. But then, everything changed, and I had to leave." The cryptic explanation raised more questions than it answered, but Jake could sense Emma's reluctance to elaborate. Instead of pressing for details, he focused on ensuring the child felt safe and welcome in their temporary sanctuary. "Well, your granddad was right about your special hands," Sophia said warmly. "I've been helping Dad since I was little, but you know things I've never even heard of." Emma's face brightened at the praise, revealing the vulnerable child beneath her serious exterior. "You're really good too. I can tell you understand how machines think." The easy camaraderie developing between the two girls warmed Jake's heart, while simultaneously deepening his concern about Emma's living situation. Sophia had been without a mother figure for 2 years, and Emma clearly needed stability and care. Perhaps they could help each other in ways that went beyond mechanical knowledge. As twilight settled over Meadowbrook, Jake faced the practical question of where Emma would spend the night. The child had been evasive about her living arrangements, and her earlier admission about not eating for 24 hours suggested she had no reliable shelter. "Emma," Jake said carefully, "I know you said you'd figure out where to stay tonight, but I'd feel better if you stayed here with us. We have a guest room that's not being used." Emma's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and wariness. "You don't know me. Why would you want to help?" "Because that's what people do," Sophia said simply. "When someone needs help, you help them. Right, Dad?" Jake nodded, struck by his daughter's instinctive understanding of basic human decency. Sophia's right. Besides, anyone who can fix Mrs. Henderson's car when even I was struggling with it deserves a safe place to sleep. Emma looked between father and daughter, clearly struggling with whether to trust their offer. Her hesitation spoke to experiences that had taught her to be cautious about accepting kindness, suggesting a background marked by disappointment or betrayal. "I don't have any money to pay you," Emma said finally. "We're not asking for money," Jake replied gently. "We're asking if you'd like to stay for dinner and sleep in a real bed tonight." The simple offer seemed to overwhelm Emma's carefully maintained composure. Tears gathered in her eyes as she nodded silently, unable to speak around the emotion closing her throat. Sophia immediately moved closer, placing a protective arm around Emma's shoulders. "Come on, let's go upstairs and I'll show you where everything is. Do you have any clothes or stuff?" Emma shook her head, indicating that whatever possessions she might have were either lost or left behind somewhere. The revelation that she was traveling with nothing but the clothes on her back reinforced Jake's growing conviction that Emma was running from something or someone. The Fisher family's modest apartment above the garage reflected their practical lifestyle and limited resources. The furniture was sturdy rather than stylish, chosen for durability and comfort rather than appearance. Family photographs lined the mantelpiece, showing happier times when Jake's ex-wife Ruby had still been part of their lives. Sophia led Emma through the small space with obvious pride, pointing out the bathroom, the kitchen, and finally the guest room that had served mainly as storage since Ruby's departure. The room was small but clean, with a single bed covered by one of Mrs. Booth's hand-stitched quilts and a window that looked out over Meadowbrook's quiet streets. "It's not fancy," Sophia said apologetically, "but the bed's really comfortable and you can see the park from the window." Emma stood in the doorway, staring at the simple room as if it were a palace. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I haven't slept in a real bed in so long." The admission hit Jake like a physical blow, confirming his worst fears about Emma's recent living conditions. How long had this 8-year-old child been surviving on the streets, sleeping rough and scavenging for food? "How long?" he asked quietly. Emma's shoulders tensed, and she turned away from the window. "A while. Time gets fuzzy when you're moving a lot." Jake knelt down to Emma's eye level, his voice gentle but serious. "Emma, I need you to know that you're safe here. Whatever brought you to Meadowbrook, whatever you're running from, we're going to figure out how to help you." Emma studied his face with the intensity of someone much older, searching for signs of deception or hidden motives. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because her rigid posture slowly relaxed. "I'm not supposed to trust strangers," she said simply. "But you fixed cars like my granddad, and Sophia reminds me of someone I used to know." The reference to someone from her past intrigued Jake, but he resisted the urge to probe further. Emma was clearly traumatized by recent experiences, and pushing too hard for information might cause her to retreat or even flee. Instead, he focused on immediate practical needs. "Are you hungry? We were going to heat up some of Mrs. Booth's casserole for dinner." Emma nodded eagerly, her stomach choosing that moment to rumble audibly and remind everyone that she was still a growing child with basic physical needs that had been neglected for far too long. The three of them prepared dinner together in the small kitchen, with Sophia chattering about school friends and local gossip while Emma listened with obvious fascination. For a child who had been isolated from normal social interactions, Sophia's stories about typical teenage drama and small-town life seemed as exotic as tales from a foreign country. "Do you go to school?" Sophia asked as they sat down to eat. Emma's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I used to. I liked it, especially math and science. But then things changed." "What kind of things?" Sophia pressed gently. Emma set down her fork and stared at her plate. "Bad things. Things that made it so I couldn't stay where I was anymore." Jake recognized the signs of a child who had experienced trauma beyond her ability to process or articulate. Emma's vague responses and careful word choices suggested she was protecting herself from memories too painful to confront directly. "Well, if you stay in Meadowbrook, you could go to school here," Sophia said optimistically. "Mrs. Walsh is the principal, and she's really nice. I bet she'd love to meet you." Emma looked up with a mixture of hope and fear. "Do you think I could? I mean, really go to school again?" "I don't see why not," Jake said carefully. "Though we'd need to work out some details about your living situation and contact your family." The moment Jake mentioned family, Emma's expression shuddered completely. She pushed back from the table and stood up abruptly, her entire body radiating distress. "I can't," she said, her voice tight with panic. "I can't go back. Please don't make me go back." Sophia immediately moved to Emma's side, her protective instincts fully engaged. "Nobody's going to make you do anything you don't want to do," she said firmly, shooting her father a warning look. Jake raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Emma, I'm not going to force you to do anything. But if you're in some kind of trouble, there might be people who can help. You don't understand," Emma said, tears now flowing freely. "The people who are supposed to help are the ones I'm running from." The cryptic statement sent chills down Jake's spine. Emma's fear seemed genuine and deep-rooted, suggesting experiences that had taught her to distrust authority figures and official channels of help. "Can you tell us what happened?" he asked gently. Emma shook her head violently. "I can't. If I tell, they'll find me and take me back, and then everything will be worse than before." Sophia wrapped her arms around Emma in a fierce hug. "Then we won't tell anyone anything you don't want us to tell. Right, Dad?" Jake found himself in an impossible position. Every instinct told him that Emma needed professional help and official intervention to ensure her safety and welfare, but her obvious terror at the thought of involving authorities suggested that the situation was far more complex than simple neglect or abandonment. "Right," he said finally. "For now, we keep this between us while we figure out what's best for everyone." Emma's relief was palpable as she collapsed back into her chair. "Thank you. I know you think I'm just a kid who doesn't know what's good for her, but I promise I'm not making this up. There really are bad people who want to hurt me." Jake believed her completely. Emma's fear was too genuine and specific to be the product of childhood imagination or misunderstanding. Someone had clearly harmed or threatened this child, driving her to flee whatever situation she had been in and survive on her own for an extended period. "What do you need us to do to help you feel safe?" he asked. Emma considered the question seriously. "Can I stay here for a few days, just until I figure out what to do next? I promise I won't be any trouble, and I can help around the garage to earn my keep." "You don't need to earn anything," Sophia said indignantly. "You're our friend now, and friends help each other." The simple declaration of friendship seemed to overwhelm Emma's emotional defenses. She began sobbing with the intensity of someone who had been holding back tears for far too long, finally allowing herself to feel safe enough to show vulnerability. Jake and Sophia flanked Emma on either side, offering comfort without demanding explanations. They sat together in the small kitchen as darkness settled over Meadowbrook. Three people who had found each other at exactly the moment when they all needed connection most. Outside, the first autumn rain began pattering against the windows, a gentle sound that seemed to cocoon them in warmth and safety. Emma's sobs gradually subsided into exhausted sniffles, and Jake could see that the emotional release had drained her remaining energy. "Why don't we get you settled in for the night?" he suggested. "Tomorrow we can figure out next steps." Emma nodded gratefully, allowing Sophia to lead her back to the guest room. Jake remained in the kitchen, cleaning up the dinner dishes while processing the evening's revelations. He had taken in a homeless child on impulse, but Emma's situation was clearly far more complicated than simple abandonment or family dysfunction. The sound of Sophia's voice drifted from the guest room as she helped Emma get settled for the night. "Do you want me to leave the light on? Sometimes I still do that when I'm scared." "You get scared too?" Emma asked, surprised. "Everyone gets scared sometimes," Sophia replied matter-of-factly. "The trick is finding people who make you feel less scared." Jake smiled at his daughter's wisdom while simultaneously worrying about the implications of Emma's presence in their lives. He had no legal right to harbor a runaway child, regardless of his good intentions. If Emma was indeed fleeing from dangerous people, his intervention might put all of them at risk. But looking at the guest room where Emma was finally experiencing safety and comfort for the first time in months, Jake knew he couldn't turn her away. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as an improvised family bound by compassion rather than blood. The rain continued falling as Meadowbrook settled into sleep, washing the streets clean and promising fresh beginnings. In the modest apartment above Fisher's Auto Repair, an 8-year-old girl with extraordinary mechanical skills and devastating secrets finally closed her eyes in a real bed, surrounded by people who cared about her welfare more than their own convenience. Neither Jake nor Sophia could have imagined that their simple act of kindness was about to intersect with a story of loss and searching that stretched far beyond their quiet town. In a luxury hotel room 300 miles away, a woman with Emma's same dark hair and intelligent eyes stared sleeplessly at her phone, waiting for news that never came about the daughter who had vanished 6 months earlier. Victoria Cross had searched every corner of 3 states, hired the best private investigators money could buy, and offered rewards that could change lives. But she had never thought to look in a small Oregon town where her missing daughter was finally learning to trust again, one carefully repaired engine at a time. The distance between mother and child was measured in more than miles. It was measured in misunderstandings, missed connections, and the kind of emotional wounds that no amount of money could heal. But sometimes the most unlikely circumstances create opportunities for redemption, and sometimes the people we need most appear exactly when we've stopped believing in miracles. As Emma drifted off to sleep in her borrowed bed, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the day's unexpected kindness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult decisions, but tonight she was warm and safe and, for the first time in months, not entirely alone. The story of how a little girl's mechanical genius would ultimately reunite a fractured family was just beginning, though none of the participants yet understood their roles in the unfolding drama. In the quiet darkness of Meadowbrook, 3 lives had already begun to intertwine in ways that would change everything, proving once again that the most profound transformations often begin with the smallest acts of human decency. The morning light filtered through the guest room curtains as Emma slowly awakened to the unfamiliar sensation of feeling truly rested. For the first time in months, she had slept through the night without startling awake at every sound, without the constant vigilance that had become second nature during her weeks of hiding. The soft voices drifting from the kitchen below spoke of a normal family beginning their day, a routine that felt both foreign and desperately appealing. Sophia appeared in the doorway carrying a stack of clothes. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "I brought you some of my old things. They might be a little big, but they're clean." Emma sat up in bed, still marveling at the simple luxury of clean sheets and a comfortable mattress. "You don't have to give me your clothes. They don't fit me anymore anyway," Sophia replied with a dismissive wave. "Besides, Dad says we're taking you into town this morning to meet some people, so you'll want to look nice." The mention of meeting people immediately triggered Emma's anxiety. Her body tensed as all the old fears came rushing back. "What people? You promised you wouldn't tell anyone about me." Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, her expression gentle but firm. "We're not breaking any promises, but if you're going to stay in Meadowbrook, even for a little while, there are some folks who should know you're here, good people who can help keep you safe." Emma pulled the quilt up to her chin, her mind racing with possibilities of discovery and forced return to the nightmare she had escaped. "I don't think that's a good idea. Maybe I should just move on." "Where would you go?" Sophia asked quietly. "And how would you eat? Where would you sleep?" The practical questions hung in the air like a challenge Emma couldn't answer. She had survived for months through a combination of luck, skill, and the kindness of strangers. But she knew that her luck couldn't hold forever. Winter was approaching, and the casual work that had sustained her during warmer months would become scarcer. Jake appeared in the doorway, carrying a steaming mug of hot chocolate topped with marshmallows. "Good morning, Emma. Did you sleep well?" Emma nodded, accepting the warm mug gratefully. The simple gesture of care touched her more deeply than Jake could have known. "Thank you for letting me stay. Thank you for fixing 3 more cars yesterday," Jake replied with a smile. Words already getting around town about the young mechanic, who can diagnose problems better than most professionals. The comment made Emma's stomach clench with worry. People are talking about me. Jake sensed her distress and sat down in the room's single chair. In a good way, he assured her. Mrs. Henderson told everyone at the diner that you fixed her car when even I was stumped. People are impressed, not suspicious. But what if the wrong people hear about me? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophia and Jake exchanged glances, both recognizing the depth of Emma's fear. Whatever had driven this child to flee her previous situation had left her deeply traumatized and convinced that discovery would lead to terrible consequences. Emma, Jake said gently, I know you're scared, and I know you have reasons for being scared, but hiding forever isn't really living. Sometimes you have to trust that there are more good people than bad people in the world. Emma considered his words while sipping the hot chocolate. The warmth spreading through her chest came from more than just the drink. It came from the novel experience of being cared for without conditions or expectations. Who did you want me to meet? She asked finally. Mrs. Booth, for starters, Sophia said. She's the one who made that casserole yesterday, and she's basically the unofficial grandmother of everyone in town under the age of 20. Emma remembered Mrs. Booth's kindness from the previous day and felt slightly less anxious. She seems nice. She is, Jay confirmed. And I thought we might stop by the school, just so Principal Walsh knows you're in town. You don't have to enroll or anything, but if you decide you want to attend classes, she'll need to know you exist. The possibility of returning to school filled Emma with conflicting emotions. She had always loved learning, especially mathematics and science, but school also meant questions about her background and family situation that she couldn't answer honestly. What would I tell them about where I came from? She asked. Jake had been wrestling with this question all night. He couldn't encourage Emma to lie, but he also couldn't force her to reveal information that might put her in danger. We'll figure that out together, he said diplomatically. For now, we can just say you're staying with us temporarily, while some family matters get sorted out. Emma nodded slowly, recognizing that this response was vague enough to be safe, while still allowing her to access normal childhood experiences like education and friendship. An hour later, the three of them walked down Main Street toward the center of Meadowbrook. Emma wore Sophia's outgrown jeans and a sweater that hung loosely on her smaller frame, but the clothes were clean and warm and made her feel more like a normal child than she had in months. Meadowbrook bustled with morning activity as shopkeepers opened their stores and residents went about their daily routines. Emma observed everything with the heightened awareness of someone accustomed to constantly assessing her environment for threats and opportunities. There's Mrs. Booth, Sophia said, pointing toward Betty's Corner Cafe, where an elderly woman was arranging outdoor seating despite the cool morning air. Mrs. Elena Booth looked up as they approached, her face immediately brightening when she spotted Emma. Well, good morning, dear. I was hoping I'd see you again today. Emma managed a small smile, still cautious, but warmed by the genuine affection in Mrs. Booth's voice. Good morning, Mrs. Booth. I heard you worked miracles on several cars yesterday, Mrs. Booth said, her eyes twinkling with pride, as if Emma were her own granddaughter. The whole town's buzzing about our young mechanical genius. The praise made Emma blush, but it also triggered her ever-present anxiety about drawing too much attention. I just like fixing things. Well, you're certainly good at it, Mrs. Booth replied, and I hear you might be staying in town for a while. Emma glanced at Jake, seeking guidance on how to respond. Maybe, if that's okay. More than okay, Mrs. Booth said firmly. This town could use more young people with your talents and work ethic. Have you had breakfast? Before Emma could respond, Mrs. Booth was already leading them toward the cafe's entrance. I made fresh cinnamon rolls this morning, and I suspect growing children need proper fuel for their day. The interior of Betty's Corner Cafe embodied everything Emma had imagined about small-town gathering places. Mismatched tables and chairs created cozy conversation areas. Local artwork covered the walls, and the air was thick with the aroma of coffee and fresh baking. Several customers looked up as they entered, their faces showing friendly curiosity rather than suspicion. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Emma, Mrs. Booth announced to the room. She's the young lady who's been helping Jake with some particularly challenging automotive problems. Emma found herself the center of attention from a dozen adults, all smiling and nodding approvingly. The experience felt surreal after months of trying to remain invisible and unnoticed. "Heard you fixed Martha Henderson's car when even Jake was scratching his head," said a weathered man in work clothes. "That's impressive, young lady." "Thank you," Emma replied quietly, overwhelmed by the genuine warmth in the room. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes approached their table. "I'm Principal Walsh from the elementary school. Sophia's told me wonderful things about you." Emma's anxiety spiked at meeting the school principal, but Mrs. Walsh's demeanor was more grandmotherly than authoritarian. "Nice to meet you, ma'am. If you're interested in attending classes while you're in town, we'd love to have you," Principal Walsh said. "I understand you have quite a gift for mathematics and science." "I like learning," Emma admitted carefully. "But my situation is kind of complicated right now." Principal Walsh nodded understandingly. "Well, the invitation stands whenever you're ready. Education should never have to wait for perfect circumstances." The casual acceptance and support from these virtual strangers overwhelmed Emma's emotional defenses. These people were offering friendship and assistance without demanding explanations or proof of worthiness. It was a type of community care she had only read about in books. "Are you okay, honey?" Mrs. Booth asked, noticing Emma's tears. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, embarrassed by her display of emotion. "I'm fine. It's just been a long time since people were this nice to me." The admission created a moment of uncomfortable silence as the adults processed the implications of Emma's words. Jake could see several people exchanging concerned glances, their protective instincts clearly aroused by signs that this child had experienced hardship beyond her years. "Well, you're part of our community now," Mrs. Booth said firmly, "and we take care of our own." The simple declaration of belonging hit Emma like a physical force. For months, she had been a stranger everywhere she went, always temporary, always ready to move on when circumstances required. The idea that she might actually belong somewhere felt almost too good to believe. Officer David Hunt entered the cafe during their conversation, his uniform immediately causing Emma to tense with fear. Jake noticed her reaction and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Morning, everyone," Officer Hunt said cheerfully, clearly a regular customer. "The usual, Mrs. Booth?" "Of course, David," Mrs. Booth replied. "Let me introduce you to Emma. She's staying with Jake and Sophia for a while." Officer Hunt approached their table with the easy manner of someone accustomed to being welcome in social situations. He was younger than Emma had expected, probably in his late 20s, with an open face that suggested more interest in helping than enforcing. "Nice to meet you, Emma," he said, extending his hand for a shake. "I hear you're quite the mechanic." Emma reluctantly shook his hand, her body language screaming discomfort, despite her efforts to appear normal. "Nice to meet you too, sir." Officer Hunt seemed to sense her distress and didn't prolong the interaction. "Well, if you're working on cars around town, make sure to stay safe. Some of those engines can be tricky." "I will," Emma replied, grateful that he hadn't asked probing questions about her background or living situation. After Officer Hunt moved to the counter to place his order, Emma visibly relaxed. Jake made a mental note to have a private conversation with the young officer about Emma's obvious fear of law enforcement, though he would need to do so without betraying Emma's confidence. "Would you like to see the school?" Principal Walsh asked. "We don't have to discuss enrollment today, but I thought you might enjoy meeting some of the other children your age." Emma looked to Jake for guidance, clearly torn between curiosity about normal school life and fear of deeper involvement in community structures that might lead to uncomfortable questions. "We could just walk through the halls," Jake suggested. "No pressure to commit to anything." Emma nodded slowly, intrigued despite her apprehensions. "Okay, just a quick look." Meadowbrook Elementary School occupied a charming brick building that had served the community for nearly 70 years. The hallways were lined with student artwork and achievement displays, creating an atmosphere of celebration and encouragement that immediately appealed to Emma's long-dormant academic interests. "This is our third-grade classroom," Principal Walsh said, stopping outside a bright room where children were working at small tables. "You'd probably be placed here based on your age, though we might need to do some assessment to determine the best academic fit." Emma peered through the window at children her own age, engaged in group projects and individual assignments. They looked happy and engaged, completely absorbed in their learning. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like to be part of that normal childhood experience again. "They're studying ecosystems this week," Principal Walsh continued. "Yesterday, they built model habitats for different animal species." "That sounds interesting," Emma said wistfully. Sophia caught the longing in Emma's voice and impulsively made a decision that would change everything. "Why don't you start coming with me tomorrow? Just to try it out. You don't have to officially enroll or anything." Emma's eyes widened with possibility and terror in equal measure. "Do you think I could? Just for a day or two?" Principal Walsh smiled warmly. "I think that's a wonderful idea. We can call it a trial period while you decide if Meadowbrook Elementary is a good fit." The casual acceptance of her tentative participation in normal childhood activities overwhelmed Emma once again. These people were offering her the chance to experience education, friendship, and community belonging without demanding the background information she couldn't safely provide. "Thank you," Emma whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you all so much." As they walked back toward the garage, Emma felt a lightness in her chest that had been absent for so long she had forgotten what hope felt like. For the first time since fleeing her previous situation, she was beginning to believe that she might have found a place where she could build a new life. But 300 miles away in Seattle, Victoria Cross was about to make a decision that would send ripples of consequence toward the quiet town of Meadowbrook. The private investigator she had hired 6 months earlier had finally produced a lead worth pursuing, a reported sighting of a child matching Emma's description in a small Oregon community. Victoria had followed dozens of similar leads, each one ending in disappointment and renewed despair. But this time felt different. This time, the child in question had demonstrated mechanical knowledge that matched perfectly with the skills her daughter had learned from her beloved grandfather. As Emma walked through Meadowbrook thinking about ecosystems and new friendships, her mother was booking a flight to Portland and preparing to discover that sometimes the people we search for are hiding in plain sight, rebuilding their lives one small act of kindness at a time. The collision between Emma's newfound sense of belonging and Victoria's relentless search for her missing daughter was now inevitable, though neither yet understood how profoundly their reunion would challenge everything they thought they knew about family, forgiveness, and the true meaning of home. 3 days into Emma's trial period at Meadowbrook Elementary, the rhythms of normal childhood had begun to feel almost natural again. She sat at a small desk in Mrs. Jennifer Park's 3rd grade classroom, working through mathematics problems that challenged her intellect while allowing her to blend in with her peers. The other children had accepted her presence with the easy adaptability of youth, though several had noticed her unusual maturity and extensive general knowledge. "Emma, would you like to share your solution with the class?" Mrs. Park asked, gesturing toward the complex word problem written on the whiteboard. Emma looked up from her paper, where she had solved the multi-step equation using methods typically taught in middle school. She had learned to moderate her responses to avoid drawing unwanted attention, but mathematics had always been her refuge during difficult times. "I think the answer is 42, she said carefully, "because you have to account for the time difference and the varying speeds." Mrs. Park smiled with genuine appreciation. "That's correct, and your method shows very sophisticated thinking. Have you studied algebra before?" Emma felt her cheeks flush as 20 pairs of young eyes focused on her with newfound interest. "My grandfather taught me some things about numbers and how they work together." The mention of her grandfather brought the familiar pang of loss, but it no longer carried the devastating grief that had once threatened to overwhelm her. Living with Jake and Sophia had begun to heal wounds she hadn't even realized were still bleeding. "Well, your grandfather did an excellent job," Mrs. Park said warmly. "Perhaps you could help tutor some of the other students during our mathematics enrichment time." Emma nodded shyly, pleased by the opportunity to be useful, while simultaneously worried about standing out too much. Her survival instincts still warned against becoming too visible or memorable, even in this safe environment. During lunch period, Emma sat with Sophia and a group of older students who had gradually accepted her as an honorary member of their social circle. The age difference seemed less important than their shared interests in science, books, and the kind of philosophical discussions that entertained bright children. "My dad says you fixed Mr. Castellano's truck when the dealership couldn't figure out what was wrong," said Marcus Thompson, a 14-year-old whose family ran the town's hardware store. "How did you learn to do that?" Emma picked at her sandwich, considering how much to reveal. "I've always been good with mechanical things. My grandfather said I had intuitive understanding." "That's so cool," said Jessica Miller, a 13-year-old with dreams of becoming an engineer. "I wish I could understand engines like that. All I see when I look under a car hood is confusing metal parts." "It's really just about listening," Emma explained, warming to a subject that had always brought her joy. "Every engine has its own voice, and when something's wrong, the voice changes. You learn to hear the differences." Sophia beamed with pride at her new friend's ability to explain complex concepts in simple terms. "Emma's teaching me how to diagnose problems by sound. Yesterday I figured out that Mrs. Rodriguez's car needed new brake pads just by listening to it." The group of students peppered Emma with questions about automotive repair, treating her expertise with the kind of awe typically reserved for superheroes or professional athletes. Emma found herself relaxing into the role of teacher, sharing knowledge that had once been a source of connection with her beloved grandfather. "Could you show us sometime?" Marcus asked eagerly. "My dad's always working on the store's delivery truck, and he might let us watch if an expert was teaching." Emma's heart swelled at being called an expert, even by children not much older than herself. "I'd like that. Maybe we could start with basic maintenance things that everyone should know." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a woman Emma hadn't seen before, someone whose expensive clothes and confident bearing marked her as an outsider to Meadowbrook's casual atmosphere. The woman was speaking intensely with Principal Walsh near the school's entrance, gesturing with the kind of urgency that suggested important business. "Who's that?" Emma asked, pointing toward the stranger. Sophia squinted across the playground. "I don't know, but she looks like she's from the city. Probably some parent checking out the school for their kid." Emma studied the woman more carefully, noting her dark hair and sharp features. Something about her seemed familiar, though Emma couldn't place where she might have seen her before. The woman's body language spoke of someone accustomed to getting answers and results, the kind of person who didn't accept delays or excuses. "She looks important," Jessica observed, "like a lawyer or business executive or something." Emma felt an inexplicable chill run down her spine as she watched the stranger's animated conversation with Principal Walsh. Her survival instincts, honed by months of vigilance, were sending warning signals that she couldn't quite understand or explain. "I think I should go," Emma said suddenly, standing up from the lunch table. "Where?" Sophia asked, concerned by her friend's abrupt change in demeanor. "Back to the garage." "I just remembered I promised to help your dad with something this afternoon." Sophia recognized the signs of Emma's anxiety and immediately stood as well. "I'll come with you. We can tell Mrs. Park that you're not feeling well." As they gathered their belongings, Emma cast another glance toward the woman speaking with Principal Walsh. The stranger had pulled out what appeared to be a photograph, showing it to the principal while asking questions that seemed increasingly urgent. Emma's blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. Someone was looking for her, showing her picture, asking if anyone had seen a missing child. All the safety and belongings she had begun to feel in Meadowbrook suddenly seemed as fragile as morning frost. "We need to leave right now," Emma whispered to Sophia, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Sophia didn't ask questions. She had learned to trust Emma's instincts about danger, even when she didn't understand the source of the threat. They slipped away from the playground through a side gate, making their way quickly toward Main Street and the relative safety of Fisher's Auto Repair. Jake was working under the hood of a pickup truck when they burst through the garage door, both girls breathing hard from their rapid walk across town. He emerged from beneath the vehicle, immediately noticing Emma's pale complexion and frightened expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag while studying Emma's face with growing concern. "There's someone at the school," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A woman from somewhere else, asking questions and showing pictures." Jake felt his stomach drop as he realized the implications. They had always known this moment might come, but he had hoped for more time to figure out Emma's situation and explore legal options for keeping her safe. "Are you sure she was asking about you?" he asked gently. Emma nodded. tears beginning to gather in her eyes. I could tell by the way she was talking to Principal Walsh. She had a picture, and she looked really determined. Sophia moved protectively closer to Emma, her young face set with determination. She can't make Emma go anywhere she doesn't want to go, right, Dad? Jake wished he could offer reassurances, but the legal reality was complicated. If Emma was indeed a missing child, authorities would have every right to return her to her legal guardians, regardless of her own wishes or the circumstances that had driven her to flee. Let's not panic until we know more, he said carefully. Maybe this woman isn't even looking for you specifically. But even as he spoke the words, Jake could see that Emma didn't believe them any more than he did. Her survival instincts had been finely tuned by months of hiding, and she clearly recognized a direct threat when she encountered one. I should leave, Emma said, her voice steadying as she shifted into self-preservation mode. I should pack my things and go before she finds me. Where would you go? Sophia demanded, echoing the same question she had asked days earlier. It's getting colder, and you don't have any money or a place to stay. Emma's shoulders sagged as she confronted the reality of her limited options. Running had become her default response to danger, but she was tired of running, tired of being alone, tired of surviving instead of living. I don't know, she admitted, the words coming out as a broken whisper. I just know I can't go back. Jake knelt down to Emma's eye level, his voice gentle but firm. You're not going anywhere until we understand what's happening and explore all our options. This is your home now, and we're going to fight for you. Emma looked up at him with eyes that held far too much pain for someone so young. What if you can't win? What if they have more power than you do? A question cut straight to Jake's deepest fears. He was a small-town mechanic with limited resources, facing an unknown adversary who apparently had enough influence to track Emma across multiple states. The odds seemed overwhelming, but his determination to protect this vulnerable child was absolute. Then we'll figure out another way, he said simply. Sometimes the most important battles aren't about power or money. Sometimes they're about what's right. Sophia nodded emphatically. Besides, this whole town loves Emma now. Everyone from Mrs. Booth to Officer Hunt thinks she's amazing. That has to count for something. Emma felt a flicker of hope, despite her fear. The idea that an entire community might rally to protect her was almost too wonderful to believe. She had spent so long feeling alone and powerless that the possibility of having allies seemed like a fantasy. Do you really think people would help me? She asked hesitantly. I know they would, Jake replied without hesitation. You've become part of this community, Emma. People don't just abandon family. The word family sent a jolt through Emma's heart. She had been so focused on running from her past that she hadn't fully processed how completely Jake and Sophia had embraced her as one of their own. They weren't just offering temporary shelter. They were offering permanent belonging. What do we do now? Sophia asked, her practical nature asserting itself despite the emotional intensity of the moment. Jake considered their options while studying Emma's frightened face. They needed more information about who was looking for Emma, and what authority they might have to take her away. They also needed to understand the legal framework surrounding custody and child welfare in cases involving runaway children. First, we're going to call Dr. Rebecca Shaw, he decided. She's a child psychologist, and she might be able to help us understand Emma's rights and our options. Emma tensed at the mention of involving another authority figure. I don't want to talk to a psychologist. They'll ask questions I can't answer. Dr. Shaw is different, Sophia assured her. She helped me after Mom left, and she never made me feel weird or broken. She's really nice. Jake pulled out his phone and dialed Dr. Shaw's number, hoping she would be available for an emergency consultation. While he waited for her to answer, he studied Emma's pale face and realized how much this child had come to mean to him and Sophia in such a short time. Dr. Shaw, this is Jake Fisher. We have a situation involving a child who needs your help, and it's quite urgent. Could you possibly meet with us this afternoon? The conversation was brief but productive. Dr. Shaw agreed to see them immediately, recognizing the seriousness in Jake's voice and the potential complexity of the situation. She'll meet us at her office in 20 minutes, Jake announced, hanging up the phone. Emma, I know you're scared, but Dr. Shaw specializes in helping children who've experienced trauma. She's not going to judge you or force you to do anything you're not ready for. Emma nodded reluctantly, understanding that she had reached a point where running was no longer a viable option. If she wanted to stay in Meadowbrook and continue building the life she had begun to love, she would need help navigating the legal and emotional complexities of her situation. As they prepared to leave for Dr. Shaw's office, none of them noticed the black sedan that had parked across from the elementary school, or the woman inside who was making phone calls and taking notes. Victoria Cross had arrived in Meadowbrook with the same determination that had built her business empire, and she was not going to leave without answers about the child who matched her daughter's description and demonstrated her daughter's remarkable mechanical abilities. The collision between Emma's desperate desire for safety and Victoria's relentless search for her missing child was now only hours away, though neither mother nor daughter yet understood how much pain and healing lay ahead of them both. Dr. Rebecca Shaw's office occupied a converted Victorian house on Elm Street, its warm wooden interior and comfortable furniture designed to put children at ease. Emma sat rigidly in an oversized armchair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she studied the diplomas and certificates covering the walls. At 38, Dr. Shaw possessed the rare combination of professional expertise and genuine warmth that made even the most traumatized children feel safe enough to share their deepest fears. "Emma, I want you to know that everything we discuss here is confidential," Dr. Shaw began, her voice gentle but clear. "The only time I would need to share information is if someone was in immediate physical danger." Emma nodded, though her posture remained defensive. "Jake says you help kids who've been through bad things." "I try to help children understand their experiences and figure out healthy ways to move forward," Dr. Shaw replied. "Jake and Sophia are clearly very concerned about you, and they want to make sure you have all the support you need." The mention of Jake and Sophia's care brought tears to Emma's eyes. For months she had survived by trusting no one completely, but these two people had somehow broken through her defenses and made her feel genuinely loved. "They're good people," Emma said quietly. "The best people I've met in a really long time." Dr. Shaw made a note on her pad, recognizing the significance of Emma's attachment to her temporary guardians. "Can you tell me a little about your situation? I understand you're staying with the Fishers while some family matters get resolved." Emma's carefully constructed composure began to crack under the weight of Dr. Shaw's compassionate attention. The story she had kept locked inside for months suddenly demanded to be told, even though sharing it might put her in danger. "My name isn't really Emma Bailey," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's just what I've been calling myself since I ran away." Dr. Shaw leaned forward slightly, maintaining eye contact while projecting calm acceptance. "What is your real name?" Emma took a shuddering breath, preparing to reveal the secret that had defined her existence for the past 6 months. "Emma Cross. My mother is Victoria Cross, and she owns a big technology company in Seattle." The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Dr. Shaw had heard of Victoria Cross, the brilliant entrepreneur whose daughter's disappearance had made national news months earlier. The pieces of Emma's story suddenly began falling into place with devastating clarity. "Emma, do you know that your mother has been searching for you?" Dr. Shaw asked gently. "There have been news reports and missing person investigations." Emma nodded miserably. "I know, but I can't go back. You don't understand what it was like." Dr. Shaw set down her notepad and focused entirely on the traumatized child in front of her. "Help me understand. What happened that made you feel you had to run away?" Emma's composure finally shattered completely as months of suppressed grief and terror came pouring out. "After my granddad died, everything changed. Mom got busier and busier with work, and then she started talking about sending me to boarding school because she didn't have time to take care of me properly." The words tumbled out between sobs as Emma described the growing emotional distance in her relationship with her mother. Victoria's increasing reliance on nannies and caregivers, the canceled plans and missed bedtime stories, the gradual transformation of their home from a place of love into an efficiently managed household. "She hired this woman, Mrs. Sterling, to be my full-time caregiver," Emma continued, her voice thick with pain. "Mrs. Sterling was mean and cold, and she told me that children should be seen and not heard, especially children whose mothers were too important for regular parenting." Dr. Shaw felt her heart breaking as she listened to Emma's account of emotional neglect, disguised as professional childcare. The 8-year-old had been systematically isolated from her mother and subjected to treatment that bordered on psychological abuse. When Mom announced that she was sending me to Cedar Hills Residential Treatment Center for behavioral adjustment, I knew I had to get away, Emma whispered. Mrs. Sterling said it was a place where difficult children learned to be more convenient for their busy parents. The mention of Cedar Hills sent chills down Dr. Shaw's spine. She was familiar with the facility, which had a reputation for using harsh disciplinary methods on children whose only crime was being inconvenient for wealthy parents. So you ran away during the family camping trip, Dr. Shaw said, beginning to understand the timeline of Emma's disappearance. Emma nodded. We were at Columbia River Gorge, and there were so many people around. I just walked away when Mom was on a business call and Mrs. Sterling was setting up the tent. I've been moving ever since, staying in different places, doing odd jobs to earn food money. The image of an 8-year-old child surviving alone for months broke Dr. Shaw's professional composure. Emma had endured experiences that would challenge most adults, all while maintaining enough emotional strength to build connections with caring strangers like the Fisher family. Emma, what you've survived is remarkable, but you shouldn't have had to survive it alone, Dr. Shaw said carefully. Your mother may not have realized how much pain you were in. Emma's expression hardened with the cynicism of someone who had learned harsh lessons about adult priorities. She knew. She just didn't care enough to change anything. Before Dr. Shaw could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent text message. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop as she read the message from Principal Walsh. Woman at school with legal documents demanding information about Emma Bailey. Says she's the child's mother. Need guidance immediately. Dr. Shaw looked up at Emma, whose face had gone pale as she recognized the expression of alarm on the psychologist's face. She's here, isn't she? My mother found me. Dr. Shaw nodded slowly, her mind racing through the legal and ethical implications of the situation. It appears so. Emma, I need you to know that you have rights in this situation. No one can force you to go anywhere until we've had a chance to properly evaluate what's in your best interests. Emma stood up abruptly, her fight-or-flight instincts taking over. I have to leave. I have to run before she can take me back. Running isn't going to solve this permanently, Dr. Shaw said firmly but kindly. Your mother has resources and legal authority that will eventually catch up with you, but there are other options we can explore. Emma looked toward the window, calculating escape routes with the practiced eye of someone who had spent months evading capture. Like what? You said she has legal authority. Dr. Shaw moved to block the path to the door, not physically restraining Emma, but making it clear that fleeing wasn't the answer. Like having an honest conversation about what happened and what needs to change for you to feel safe. Like involving child services to ensure that any custody arrangements prioritize your emotional welfare. The mention of child services triggered Emma's deepest fears. No, child services are the ones who would have sent me to Cedar Hills in the first place. They don't care about kids like me. Dr. Shaw recognized the trauma behind Emma's distrust of authority figures. But she also understood that running away again would only delay an inevitable confrontation while putting Emma at greater risk. Emma, what if I told you that there are good people in child services who specialize in protecting children from exactly the kind of situation you escaped? What if we could find a way to ensure that your voice is heard and your wishes are respected? Emma studied Dr. Shaw's face, searching for signs of deception or false promises. You really think someone would listen to what I want? I think your mother's presence here proves that she loves you and wants you back, Dr. Shaw said carefully. But I also think she needs to understand why you felt running away was your only option. A knock on the office door interrupted their conversation. Dr. Shaw's assistant appeared in the doorway, her expression tense with urgency. Dr. Shaw, there's a woman here demanding to see you immediately. She says it's about a missing child case, and she has a court order. Emma's face went white as she heard her mother's voice in the reception area, speaking with the controlled intensity that Emma remembered from high-stakes business negotiations. The sound brought back memories of feeling small and unimportant in the face of Victoria's commanding presence. Please don't let her take me, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. Please help me. Dr. Shaw made a split-second decision that would define the next phase of Emma's life. Emma, I'm going to ask you to trust me. I'm going to talk to your mother first, without you present, and I'm going to make sure she understands what you've been through and what you need. Emma shook her head frantically. She won't listen. She never listens when it comes to her work or what she thinks is best for me. Then I'll make her listen, Dr. Shaw said with quiet determination, because that's what advocates do for children who need protection. The sound of Victoria's voice grew louder as she apparently became more frustrated with the delay in seeing her daughter. Dr. Shaw could hear fragments of conversation about legal rights, parental authority, and the immediate return of a missing child. I want Jake and Sophia here, Emma said suddenly. If I have to face her, I want people who care about me in the room. Dr. Shaw nodded, recognizing the wisdom in Emma's request. I'll call them right now. And Emma, I want you to remember that you're not the same frightened child who ran away 6 months ago. You've survived incredible challenges, and you've learned to articulate your needs and feelings. That makes you stronger than you realize. As Dr. Shaw reached for her phone to call Jake, neither she nor Emma could have anticipated how the next hour would challenge everything both Victoria and Emma believed about love, family, and the true meaning of home. The reunion they were both dreading was about to become the first step in healing wounds that had festered for far too long. In the reception area, Victoria Cross paced with the restless energy of someone accustomed to immediate results. She had spent 6 months living in a nightmare of uncertainty and guilt, and now that she was finally close to reclaiming her daughter, the delay felt unbearable. But she was about to discover that finding Emma was only the beginning of a much more complex journey toward understanding and redemption. The little girl who had run away in terror was now a young person with her own voice, her own relationships, and her own very clear ideas about what constituted a safe and loving home. Victoria's assumptions about simply retrieving her missing daughter and resuming their previous life were about to be shattered by the reality of how much both of them had changed during their separation. Dr. Shaw finished her call to Jake and turned back to Emma, who was sitting rigidly in her chair, preparing for a confrontation that would determine the course of her future. They're on their way, and Emma, whatever happens in the next few hours, I want you to remember that you have people who love you and will fight for what's best for you. Emma nodded, drawing strength from the knowledge that she was no longer facing her fears alone. The 8-year-old who had fled into the wilderness 6 months earlier had been replaced by someone older, wiser, and supported by a community that valued her not for her potential convenience but for her authentic self. The moment of truth was finally at hand, and nothing would ever be the same for any of them. Victoria Cross stood in Dr. Shaw's reception area like a force of nature barely contained within professional boundaries. Her designer suit was perfectly tailored, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, and her posture radiated the kind of authority that had built a technology empire worth billions. But beneath the polished exterior, 6 months of desperate searching had taken their toll, leaving shadows under her eyes and a tremor in her hands that spoke of sleepless nights and endless worry. I don't understand the delay, Victoria said to Dr. Shaw's assistant, her voice carrying the edge of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. I have legal documentation proving that Emma Cross is my daughter, and I have every right to see her immediately. The assistant, a young woman named Sarah who had worked with Dr. Shaw for 3 years, maintained her professional composure despite the intimidating presence before her. Dr. Shaw is speaking with the child first to ensure her emotional welfare. She'll be with you shortly. Victoria's carefully controlled facade cracked slightly as frustration and 6 months of accumulated desperation threatened to overwhelm her businesslike demeanor. Her emotional welfare? I'm her mother. No one cares more about her welfare than I do. Inside the office, Dr. Shaw was helping Emma prepare for the most difficult conversation of her young life. Jake and Sophia had arrived within minutes of the phone call, both of them pale with worry but determined to support Emma through whatever lay ahead. Remember, Dr. Shaw said gently, you have the right to express your feelings and concerns. This isn't about being disrespectful to your mother, but about making sure everyone understands what you need to feel safe and loved. Emma nodded, though her hands were shaking as she gripped Sophia's fingers for moral support. What if she doesn't believe me? What if she thinks I'm just being dramatic or difficult? Jake knelt beside Emma's chair, his voice steady and reassuring. Then we'll help you find the words to make her understand. You're not alone in this. Sophia squeezed Emma's hand tighter. And no matter what happens, you'll always have us. We're not going anywhere. Dr. Shaw took a deep breath and opened the office door, stepping into the reception area to face Victoria Cross for the first time. The woman before her was smaller than she had expected, but her presence filled the room with nervous energy that spoke of barely controlled emotion. "Miss Cross, I'm Dr. Rebecca Shaw. Thank you for your patience. Before we proceed, I need to explain that your daughter has been through significant trauma, and this reunion needs to be handled very carefully." Victoria's eyes blazed with indignation and pain. Trauma? The trauma of being kidnapped and held for 6 months by strangers? The trauma of being kept from her family while I've moved heaven and earth to find her? The trauma of feeling so unsafe and unloved at home that running away seemed like her only option, Dr. Shaw replied quietly but firmly. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She staggered slightly, her hand reaching for the wall to steady herself as the implications of Dr. Shaw's statements sank in. "That's not possible," Victoria whispered. "Emma is my world. Everything I do is for her." Dr. Shaw recognized the genuine pain in Victoria's voice, but she also understood the gap between intention and impact that often existed in troubled family relationships. "I believe that you love your daughter deeply, Miss Cross, but love and feeling loved aren't always the same thing." Victoria's business-trained mind struggled to process this information through the lens of her desperate need to reclaim her missing child. "I want to see her now. Whatever misunderstandings exist, we can work them out at home." "Emma is very frightened," Dr. Shaw said carefully. "She's afraid that you'll force her to return to a situation where she felt emotionally abandoned and threatened with institutionalization." Victoria's face went white as she realized that Emma must have told Dr. Shaw about the plans for Cedar Hills. That facility was recommended by child development experts. Emma was becoming increasingly difficult and defiant, and I thought professional help would benefit her. "From Emma's perspective, it felt like punishment for being inconvenient," Dr. Shaw replied. "She believed you were trying to send her away because you didn't want to deal with her emotional needs." The accusation struck at Victoria's deepest fears about her own adequacy as a mother. She had always justified her intense focus on work as necessary to provide for Emma's future, but she had never considered that her daughter might interpret her dedication as abandonment. "I never wanted to send her away," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "I just didn't know how to help her after my father died. She was so angry and sad, and I felt completely inadequate." Dr. Shaw sensed the genuine anguish beneath Victoria's defensive exterior and decided to take a different approach. "Would you be willing to have a conversation with Emma, where you listen to her perspective without trying to defend or explain? Just listen and try to understand how she experienced the situation." Victoria nodded slowly, though every instinct screamed against submitting to judgment from an 8-year-old child. "Will she come home with me afterward?" "That depends on what emerges from your conversation and what arrangements can be made to ensure Emma feels safe," Dr. Shaw replied honestly. "The goal isn't to keep you apart, but to make sure any reunion serves Emma's best interests." Dr. Shaw led Victoria into the office, where Emma sat between Jake and Sophia like a small defendant, flanked by devoted attorneys. The sight of her daughter after 6 months of desperate searching nearly brought Victoria to her knees. Emma looked older, more serious, but undeniably healthy and well cared for. "Emma," Victoria whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, sweetheart, I've missed you so much." Emma's body tensed as she studied her mother's face, searching for signs of the anger and impatience that had characterized their final months together. "Hi, Mom." The subdued greeting cut through Victoria's heart like a blade. This was not the joyful reunion she had imagined during countless sleepless nights. Her daughter was regarding her with wariness rather than relief, as if Victoria were a potential threat rather than a source of safety. "Are you all right?" Victoria asked, her eyes cataloging every detail of Emma's appearance. "Have these people been taking good care of you?" Emma glanced at Jake and Sophia before answering. "They've been wonderful. They listen to me and let me help with important things and never make me feel like I'm in the way." The implicit criticism in Emma's words made Victoria flinch, but Dr. Shaw had warned her to listen without defending. "I'm glad you've been safe. I've been so worried about you." "Were you worried or were you angry?" Emma asked, her voice carrying a maturity that shocked Victoria. because before I left, you seemed mostly angry that I wasn't acting the way you wanted me to act." Victoria felt tears threatening as she confronted the truth in her daughter's observation. "I was scared, Emma. After Granddad died, you were so sad and angry, and I didn't know how to help you feel better. You could have tried spending time with me instead of hiring more people to take care of me," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "You could have tucked me in at night instead of letting Mrs. Sterling do it. You could have listened when I tried to tell you how mean she was." Each word was like a knife to Victoria's conscience as she realized how completely she had failed to understand her daughter's emotional needs. In her determination to provide professional solutions to Emma's grief, she had inadvertently created the very abandonment and isolation that had driven Emma to flee. "Mrs. Sterling came highly recommended," Victoria said weakly, then caught herself defending again. "I'm sorry. You're right. I should have been the one taking care of you." Sophia squeezed Emma's hand encouragingly, proud of her friend's courage in articulating such complex emotions. Jake watched Victoria carefully, looking for signs of genuine understanding rather than strategic accommodation. "Why did you want to send me to Cedar Hills?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Was I really that bad?" Victoria's heart shattered as she realized how her daughter had interpreted the residential treatment recommendation. "Oh, Emma, no. You weren't bad at all. You were grieving and confused, and I thought professional help would be better than my fumbling attempts to comfort you. But I didn't want professional help," Emma said, tears now flowing freely. "I wanted my mom. I wanted you to hold me when I cried about Granddad and tell me stories like you used to when I was little." The simple request broke through every defense Victoria had built around her parenting decisions. She could see now how her well-intentioned deficiency had been experienced as rejection by a child who desperately needed emotional connection. "I thought I was doing what was best for you," Victoria whispered. "I thought giving you space and professional support would help you heal faster." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, displaying the same gestures Victoria remembered from her daughter's earliest years. "It just made me feel like you didn't want me around anymore." Dr. Shaw intervened gently as she watched both mother and daughter struggling with painful truths. "Victoria, can you help Emma understand what was really in your heart during that time?" Victoria took a shuddering breath, preparing to be more vulnerable than she had ever been in a professional context. "Emma, losing my father was the hardest thing I'd ever experienced, and watching you suffer too made it even worse. I felt like I was failing you every day because I couldn't take away your pain. But that wasn't your job," Emma said with wisdom far beyond her years. "Granddad always said that loving someone means sitting with them when they're sad, not trying to fix them." The reference to her father's wisdom hit Victoria with devastating clarity. Marcus Bailey had indeed taught Emma about love through presence rather than solutions, and Victoria had somehow forgotten those lessons in her grief and desperation. "He was right," Victoria admitted, "and I'm sorry I forgot that. I'm sorry I made you feel like your sadness was something that needed to be managed rather than shared." Emma studied her mother's face, searching for sincerity behind the apology. "If I came home, would things be different? Would you fire Mrs. Sterling and spend time with me yourself?" Victoria nodded emphatically. "Mrs. Sterling is already gone. I fired her the day after you disappeared because I realized she had been telling me what she thought I wanted to hear rather than what you actually needed." Emma looked surprised by this information. "Really? You fired her?" "Really," Victoria confirmed. "And Emma, if you're willing to come home, I want to learn how to be the mother you need me to be. I want to listen better and be present for your feelings instead of trying to solve them." Emma glanced at Jake and Sophia, drawing strength from their supportive presence. "What about your work? You always said the company needed you more than I did." Victoria felt another stab of guilt as she recognized her daughter's accurate assessment of her priorities. "The company will have to learn to function without my constant attention. You're more important than any business deal or board meeting. Do you promise?" Emma asked, her voice carrying the weight of a child who had been disappointed too many times by adult promises. Victoria met her daughter's eyes directly, making the most important commitment of her life. "I promise, Emma. And if I start slipping back into old patterns, I want you to remind me of this conversation." Dr. Shaw watched the exchange with professional satisfaction, recognizing the genuine breakthrough occurring between mother and daughter. But she also understood that words were easier than sustained behavioral change. "This is wonderful progress," she said gently, "but rebuilding trust takes time and consistency. Victoria, would you be open to family counseling to help support these changes?" Victoria nodded without hesitation. Whatever Emma needs to feel secure and loved. Emma looked at Jake and Sophia one more time, her heart breaking at the thought of leaving the people who had shown her what unconditional acceptance felt like. "If I go home with Mom, can I still visit you? Can we still be friends?" Sophia spoke before her father could respond. "Forever friends. Distance doesn't change that." Jake smiled despite his own sadness at losing Emma. "You'll always have a place here, Emma, and maybe your mom could bring you to visit soon." Victoria felt a surge of gratitude toward these strangers, who had cared for her daughter when she had failed to do so. "I'd like that very much. And I'd like to thank you properly for everything you've done for Emma." Emma stood up slowly, moving toward her mother with tentative steps. "Mom, can I hug you?" Victoria fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around her daughter, both of them crying as 6 months of separation and fear finally began to heal. "I love you so much, Emma, and I'm going to spend every day proving that to you." As mother and daughter embraced, Jake and Sophia exchanged glances that mixed sadness with hope. They were losing the child who had brought such joy to their lives, but they were also witnessing the beginning of a healing that could transform both Emma and Victoria's futures. The reunion they had all feared was becoming the first step toward a new kind of family, one built on honest communication and mutual understanding, rather than assumptions and good intentions. Emma was going home, but she was taking with her the knowledge that she deserved to be truly heard and valued, and Victoria was learning that being a mother meant more than providing financial security and professional solutions. The hardest conversations were still ahead of them, but for the first time in 6 months, both mother and daughter had hope that their family could be rebuilt on a foundation strong enough to weather future storms. The evening air carried the first hint of autumn chill as Emma stood in the guest room above Fisher's Auto Repair, carefully folding the few clothes Sophia had given her into a small bag. Through the window, she could see Victoria waiting in her rental car, speaking quietly on her phone while occasionally glancing up at the apartment with an expression that mixed hope and uncertainty. "You don't have to pack everything tonight," Sophia said from the doorway, her voice thick with the effort of holding back tears. "Mom said you could visit whenever you want." Emma turned from the window, her own eyes red from crying. "I know, but it feels important to take something with me. These clothes remind me of how kind you were to me when I had nothing." Sophia entered the room and sat on the bed where Emma had slept safely for the past week. "It's weird how fast everything changed. A week ago, you were just this mysterious girl who could fix cars, and now you're going back to being a billionaire's daughter." Emma sat beside Sophia, studying her friend's face. "I'm still the same person. Having money doesn't change who I am inside, but your life will be so different," Sophia said sadly. "Private schools and fancy clothes and people who want to be your friend because of your mom's company." Emma had been thinking about this exact concern during the emotional afternoon at Dr. Shaw's office. Her reunion with Victoria had been genuine and healing, but it had also reminded her of the vast differences between her two worlds. "Maybe it doesn't have to be that different," Emma said thoughtfully. "Maybe I can help Mom understand that money isn't the most important thing about family." Jake appeared in the doorway carrying a small wrapped package. "I have something for you, Emma, a going-away present." Emma accepted the gift with trembling hands, touched by Jake's thoughtfulness during what was clearly a difficult farewell for him as well. Inside the package was a small set of precision tools, perfect for delicate mechanical work. "These belong to my grandfather," Jake explained. "He gave them to me when I was about your age and showing interest in engines. I want you to have them so you'll always remember that your gift for fixing things is something special." Emma clutched the tools to her chest, overwhelmed by the significance of the gift. "I can't take something this important from your family." "You are family," Jake said simply, "and family shares the things that matter most." The words broke through Emma's careful composure, and she flung herself into Jake's arms, sobbing with the intensity of someone saying goodbye to everything safe and familiar. "I'm scared," she whispered against his shoulder. "What if Mom and I can't figure out how to be a real family? What if she gets busy again and forgets the promises she made today?" Jake held Emma tightly, his own heart breaking at the thought of this brave child facing new uncertainties after everything she had already endured. "Then you call us and we'll remind her, and if that doesn't work, you always have a place here." Sophia joined the hug, creating a circle of warmth and support that Emma tried to memorize for the difficult days ahead. Besides, Dr. Shaw said she's going to keep working with both of you. She won't let your mom forget her promises. Emma nodded, drawing strength from the knowledge that she wasn't facing the future entirely alone. Dr. Shaw had scheduled weekly family counseling sessions and had given Emma her personal phone number for emergencies. A gentle knock on the apartment door announced Victoria's arrival. She climbed the stairs slowly, her designer heels echoing on the wooden steps as she prepared to enter the modest space where her daughter had found refuge. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Victoria said from the doorway, her voice carrying a humility that was new to her carefully controlled persona. "I wanted to thank you both properly before we leave." Jake stepped forward, extending his hand to Victoria with the same courtesy he showed to all his customers. "You don't need to thank us. Emma brought more joy to our lives than we gave to hers." Victoria shook his hand, studying the man who had cared for her daughter when she had failed to do so. Jake's hands were permanently stained with motor oil, his clothes were simple and practical, and his home was modest by any standard. But his eyes held a warmth and steadiness that Victoria envied. "I understand Emma learned a great deal about automotive repair while she was here," Victoria said. "I'd like to compensate you for your time and expertise." Jake's expression grew cold, and he dropped Victoria's hand abruptly. "Emma isn't a transaction. The time we spent together was a gift, not a service." Victoria immediately realized her mistake, recognizing that she had inadvertently reduced her daughter's emotional healing to a business arrangement. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that your kindness could be purchased. I just wanted to show my gratitude." "Your gratitude is enough," Sophia said firmly, moving protectively closer to her father. "We didn't help Emma because we wanted money. We helped her because she needed help." Emma watched the exchange with growing anxiety, seeing the cultural and economic gap that existed between her two families. Victoria's instinct to solve problems with financial solutions clashed sharply with the Fisher's value system, based on personal connection and genuine care. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "Jake and Sophia don't want your money. They want your respect." Victoria looked at her daughter with new understanding, realizing that Emma was teaching her something fundamental about human relationships. "You're absolutely right. Jake, Sophia, I respect what you've done for Emma more than I can express in words. You gave her something I had forgotten how to give her." "What's that?" Sophia asked. "Unconditional acceptance," Victoria replied, her voice heavy with self-awareness. "You loved her for who she is, not for who you wanted her to become." Jake's expression softened as he recognized the genuine remorse in Victoria's voice. "That's what families do, but it's never too late to learn." Victoria nodded, accepting the gentle correction with more grace than she had shown in years of corporate negotiations. "Emma, are you ready to go home?" Emma looked around the small room one more time, imprinting every detail in her memory. The hand-stitched quilt, the view of Meadowbrook's quiet streets, the feeling of absolute safety she had experienced within these walls. "I'm ready," she said finally, "but I want to come back to visit soon." "Next weekend," Victoria promised, "if Jake and Sophia are willing to have us." Sophia's face lit up with excitement. "Really? You'd want to visit Meadowbrook?" "I'd like to see where Emma was happy," Victoria said honestly, "and I'd like to learn more about the kind of community that produces people like you." As they prepared to leave, Emma made one last request. "Mom, can we stop by Mrs. Booth's cafe before we drive to Portland? I want to say goodbye and thank her for the casserole." Victoria agreed, though she was puzzled by her daughter's attachment to a virtual stranger. She was beginning to understand that Emma's weeks in Meadowbrook had created connections that couldn't be easily severed or replaced. The small group walked down Main Street together, drawing curious glances from residents who had heard about the day's dramatic events. Word traveled fast in Meadowbrook, and by evening, most of the town knew that Emma was leaving with her biological mother. Mrs. Booth was closing the cafe when they arrived, but her face immediately brightened when she saw Emma approaching. "There's my favorite little mechanic," she said warmly, opening her arms for a hug. Emma ran into Mrs. Booth's embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon that had made her feel welcome from her first day in town. "I have to go home with my mom, but I wanted to thank you for being so kind to me." Mrs. Booth looked over Emma's head at Victoria, her experienced eyes taking in the expensive clothes and carefully controlled emotions. "You're Emma's mother? The one who's been looking for her?" "Yes, ma'am," Victoria replied, suddenly feeling like a child herself under Mrs. Booth's maternal scrutiny. "I understand you've been very good to my daughter." "Emma's been good to all of us," Mrs. Booth said firmly. "She's a special child with remarkable gifts, and I hope you know how lucky you are to have her." Victoria felt the weight of judgment in Mrs. Booth's words, recognizing that this elderly woman understood exactly why Emma had run away. "I'm learning," Victoria said humbly. "Emma's teaching me how to be a better mother." Mrs. Booth's expression softened slightly. "Children are excellent teachers if we're willing to be students. Emma, you make sure your mother remembers that." Emma nodded solemnly, understanding that Mrs. Booth was entrusting her with the responsibility of holding Victoria accountable for her promises. "I will, and I'll come back to visit soon." "You'd better," Mrs. Booth said, her voice gruff with emotion. "This town won't be the same without our resident automotive genius." As they walked back toward Victoria's rental car, Emma noticed that several other residents had gathered on their porches and in doorways to wave goodbye. Principal Walsh stood outside the school, Danny Fields leaned against his bicycle near the hardware store, and even Officer Hunt had positioned himself at the corner to offer a farewell salute. They all came to say goodbye. Emma whispered, overwhelmed by the demonstration of community affection. Victoria watched in amazement as her daughter waved to person after person, each of whom called out personal messages of love and encouragement. In less than a week, Emma had somehow become integral to this entire community's sense of itself. "How did you do it?" Victoria asked as they reached the car. "How did you make so many people care about you so quickly?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I didn't try to make them care. I just tried to be helpful and honest. Granddad always said that's how you build real friendships." Victoria felt another pang of grief for her father, whose wisdom had somehow failed to transfer to her, despite years of loving guidance. Emma had internalized Marcus Bailey's lessons about authentic relationships in ways that Victoria had never managed. "Your granddad was a wise man," Victoria said softly. "I wish I had listened to him more carefully." "It's not too late," Emma said, echoing Dr. Shaw's earlier words. "Granddad used to say that every day is a chance to start over if you're brave enough to admit your mistakes." As they drove away from Meadowbrook, Emma pressed her face to the window to watch the town's lights disappear behind them. Victoria glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing Jake and Sophia standing in front of the garage, waving until the car was completely out of sight. "Are you sorry to leave?" Victoria asked gently. Emma considered the question carefully. "I'm sad to leave, but I'm not sorry. Being in Meadowbrook taught me that I deserve to be loved for who I am, not who other people want me to be. That's something I can take anywhere." Victoria felt tears gathering in her eyes, as she realized her 8-year-old daughter had achieved a level of self-awareness that had taken Victoria decades to develop. "I want to give you that kind of love, Emma. I want to learn how to be the mother you deserve." "Then just be with me," Emma said simply. "Not the CEO version of you or the perfect mother version of you. Just be my mom who listens and cares and isn't afraid to make mistakes." Victoria reached across the console to squeeze Emma's hand, making a silent promise to honor her daughter's wisdom and trust. The road ahead would be challenging as they rebuilt their relationship from scratch, but for the first time in months, Victoria felt hopeful about their future together. As they drove through the Oregon night toward their Seattle home, both mother and daughter were changed by their week in Meadowbrook. Emma had learned that she possessed the strength to demand the love she deserved, while Victoria had discovered that true success wasn't measured in dollars or market share, but in the quality of relationships with the people who mattered most. The little girl who had fixed a stranger's Porsche with her remarkable mechanical skills had ultimately fixed something far more important: a broken family's capacity for authentic love and connection. And in a small garage in Meadowbrook, Jake and Sophia Fisher went to sleep knowing they had played a part in one of life's most precious miracles, the healing of a child's wounded heart. 2 months after Emma's return to Seattle, the Cross family home bore little resemblance to the efficiently managed household she had fled. The sterile perfection of minimalist design had given way to comfortable chaos. Emma's mechanical projects scattered across the kitchen table, family photos displayed prominently on formerly bare walls, and the warm scent of home-cooked meals replacing the antiseptic smell of professional cleaning services. Victoria stood in the doorway of Emma's bedroom, watching her daughter work on a complex engine model with the same focused intensity she had once reserved for board presentations. Emma had insisted on keeping her room simple rather than redecorating with expensive furnishings, choosing instead to display the precision tools Jake had given her and photographs from her time in Meadowbrook. "How's the project coming?" Victoria asked, settling onto the floor beside Emma's workspace. Emma looked up with oil-stained fingers and a satisfied smile. "I think I figured out why the compression ratio was wrong. The pistons weren't aligned properly with the crankshaft." Victoria nodded as if she understood, though the technical details were beyond her comprehension. What mattered was Emma's obvious joy in working with her hands and solving complex problems through patient experimentation. "Dr. Shaw called this morning," Victoria said carefully. "She wanted to remind us about our session tomorrow, and she asked how you're feeling about starting at the new school next week." Emma's expression grew thoughtful as she set down her tiny wrench. "I'm nervous. What if the other kids think I'm weird because I like engines more than fashion, or because I lived on the streets for 6 months?" Victoria reached out to smooth Emma's hair, a gesture that had become natural again after weeks of conscious effort to provide physical affection. "Then they're not the right friends for you. The right friends will appreciate your unique interests and experiences." The conversation was interrupted by Emma's phone buzzing with a video call from Sophia. Emma's face immediately brightened as she accepted the call, holding the device so Victoria could see Sophia waving from the familiar setting of Fisher's Auto Repair. "Emma, how's the engine model coming?" Sophia asked eagerly. "Really good. I think I solved the compression problem," Emma replied, turning the phone so Sophia could see her work. "How are things in Meadowbrook?" "Busy," Sophia said with a grin. "Dad's teaching a basic auto maintenance class at the community center every Saturday, and guess what? Mrs. Booth enrolled." Emma laughed delightedly at the image of elderly Mrs. Booth learning to change oil and check tire pressure. "That's amazing. Is she any good at it?" "She's terrible," Sophia admitted cheerfully, "but she says it's never too late to learn new things." "Oh, and Danny Fields asked me to tell you that he finally fixed his bicycle chain without help." Victoria watched the easy camaraderie between the two girls with a mixture of gratitude and slight envy. Emma's friendship with Sophia represented everything healthy about childhood relationships: mutual support, shared interests, and unconditional acceptance. "Sophia, this is my mom," Emma said, angling the phone to include Victoria in the conversation. "Mom, say hi to Sophia." "Hello, Sophia," Victoria said warmly. "Emma talks about you constantly. Thank you for being such a wonderful friend." Sophia beamed at the praise. "Is Emma going to come visit this weekend like you promised?" Victoria nodded, though the logistics of regular trips to Meadowbrook were challenging given her work schedule. "We'll drive down Friday evening and stay until Sunday afternoon." Emma's excitement was palpable as she began planning all the activities she wanted to share with Sophia during their weekend reunion. Victoria marveled at her daughter's ability to maintain such strong connections across distance, recognizing it as a skill she herself had never developed. After ending the video call, Emma returned to her engine model while Victoria remained sitting on the bedroom floor, processing the changes in their relationship over the past 2 months. The weekly family counseling sessions with Dr. Shaw had been challenging but transformative, forcing both mother and daughter to examine their communication patterns and emotional needs. "Emma, can I ask you something?" Victoria said carefully. Emma nodded, continuing to work while listening. "Do you ever regret coming home with me? Do you ever wish you had stayed in Meadowbrook?" Emma's hands stilled as she considered the question with typical seriousness. "Sometimes I miss how simple everything was there. But I don't regret coming home because you're different now." "Different how?" Emma set down her tools and turned to face her mother directly. "You ask me questions about how I feel instead of telling me how I should feel. You eat dinner with me instead of working through meals. And when I have nightmares about being lost, you sit with me until I fall back asleep." Victoria felt tears gathering as she realized how profoundly her parenting approach had changed. The efficient management style that worked in corporate settings had been replaced by patient presence and emotional availability. "I learned something important in Meadowbrook," Victoria said softly. "I learned that being a good mother isn't about providing perfect solutions to every problem. It's about showing up consistently and caring about your inner world." Emma smiled, reaching out to hug her mother with the spontaneous affection that had gradually returned to their relationship. "Granddad would be proud of both of us." The mention of Marcus Bailey brought the familiar pang of grief, but it was tempered now by gratitude for the wisdom he had imparted to Emma and the healing that had emerged from their shared loss. "I think he would be," Victoria agreed. "And I think he'd especially love seeing you build engines in the kitchen and teach me about carburetors over breakfast." Emma giggled at the memory of Victoria's bewildered expression during their first technical discussion. "You're getting better at understanding mechanical stuff. Yesterday you actually knew what I meant when I talked about valve timing." Victoria's progress in learning Emma's language represented more than just acquired vocabulary. It demonstrated her commitment to entering Emma's world rather than forcing Emma to adapt entirely to hers. A knock on the front door interrupted their conversation. Victoria glanced at her watch, puzzled by the unexpected visitor, then went downstairs to investigate. Emma followed, curious about who might be calling during the evening hours. Through the front door's glass panels, Victoria could see a familiar figure holding a large cardboard box. She opened the door to find Jake Fisher standing on her doorstep, looking slightly uncomfortable in the elegant setting of her Seattle neighborhood. "Jake!" Emma exclaimed, rushing past her mother to hug the man who had become such an important figure in her life. "What are you doing here?" Jake returned Emma's hug warmly, then looked up at Victoria with a slightly sheepish expression. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit. I was in Seattle for a part supplier meeting, and I brought something for Emma." Victoria stepped aside to welcome Jake into their home, noting how his practical work clothes and calloused hands contrasted with the sophisticated interior design. "Of course not. Please, come in." Jake handed the cardboard box to Emma, who immediately began tearing open the packaging with eager anticipation. Inside, nestled in protective foam, was a scale model of a 1967 Mustang engine, complete with movable parts and detailed documentation. "It's beautiful," Emma breathed, carefully lifting the model from its packaging. "Did you make this?" Jake nodded, pleased by her obvious delight. "Sophia helped with some of the detail work. We thought you might enjoy having a project to work on with your new school friends." Victoria watched the exchange with deep appreciation for Jake's thoughtfulness and understanding of Emma's interests. The gift was personal and meaningful in ways that expensive toys could never match. "Would you like some coffee?" Victoria offered, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Emma can show you her workshop space." Emma led Jake through the house, chattering excitedly about her various projects and the mechanical principles she had been exploring. Victoria followed, observing how naturally Jake engaged with Emma's technical explanations and genuine enthusiasm. "This is impressive work," Jake said, examining Emma's engine model with professional interest. "You've really advanced your understanding of internal combustion principles." Emma beamed at the praise from someone whose opinion she valued so highly. "I've been reading the books you recommended and watching online tutorials. Mom even bought me a subscription to that engineering magazine." Jake looked at Victoria with obvious approval. "That's wonderful. It's important to nurture interests that bring joy and challenge." Victoria felt a warm glow of satisfaction at Jake's recognition of her efforts to support Emma's passions. She had initially been skeptical of her daughter's fascination with machinery, but she had come to appreciate the intellectual rigor and creative problem-solving involved in mechanical work. "Jake, can I ask you something?" Victoria said as they sat around the kitchen table. "How did you know that Emma needed space to be herself rather than pressure to conform to expectations?" Jake considered the question while sipping his coffee. "I suppose it's because I remember what it felt like to be a kid with interests that adults didn't understand. My father was patient with my curiosity about engines, even when it meant I tracked grease through the house or spent hours on projects that seemed pointless to him. I think I was so focused on Emma's academic achievement and future success that I forgot to appreciate who she is right now," Victoria admitted. Emma looked between the two adults who had shaped her understanding of family in different but equally important ways. "Maybe that's why I needed both of you. Jake taught me that my interests are valuable, and Mom is teaching me that I can be smart and successful while still being myself." Jake smiled at Emma's mature insight. "You're a wise young lady. Both of your families are lucky to have you." The casual reference to both families highlighted the unique situation Emma had created through her journey from Seattle to Meadowbrook and back again. She now belonged to multiple communities that valued different aspects of her personality and potential. "Jake, would you consider staying for dinner?" Victoria asked impulsively. "I know Emma would love to show you more of her projects, and I'd like to hear about how things are going in Meadowbrook." Jake accepted the invitation, and the three of them spent the evening sharing stories and examining Emma's various mechanical creations. Victoria found herself genuinely enjoying Jake's straightforward manner and practical wisdom, recognizing qualities that had helped heal her daughter when professional expertise had failed. As Jake prepared to leave, Emma hugged him tightly and made him promise to give her love to Sophia, Mrs. Booth, and all the other friends who had made Meadowbrook feel like home. "Remember," Jake told Emma as he stood in the doorway, "you always have a place with us. But more importantly, you now know how to create home wherever you are." After Jake's departure, Emma and Victoria sat together in the living room, both reflecting on the evening's conversations and the progress they had made as a family. "Mom, are you happy?" Emma asked suddenly. Victoria considered the question seriously. "I'm happier than I've been in years. Building a real relationship with you is more satisfying than any business success I've ever achieved." Emma nodded, satisfied with her mother's answer. "I'm happy too. It's different from being happy in Meadowbrook, but it's good different." Victoria understood what Emma meant. Their happiness was more complex now, built on conscious effort and continuous learning rather than the simple acceptance Emma had found in the Fisher family. But it was also more meaningful because it represented genuine growth and change. As they prepared for bed, Victoria realized how much their evening routine had evolved. Instead of efficient goodnight protocols managed by hired caregivers, she now spent time listening to Emma's thoughts about the day, discussing plans for tomorrow, and providing the kind of emotional connection she had once delegated to others. "Sweet dreams, sweetheart," Victoria whispered, tucking Emma into bed with the maternal tenderness she had almost forgotten how to express. "Love you, Mom," Emma replied sleepily, already drifting toward dreams filled with engine designs and weekend visits to Meadowbrook. Victoria stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her daughter sleep peacefully in the home that had become a real sanctuary, rather than just an expensive address. The little girl who had fixed a stranger's Porsche had ultimately fixed something far more valuable: a family's capacity for authentic love and genuine connection. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as Emma started at her new school, and Victoria continued learning to balance work demands with family priorities. But tonight, for the first time in years, both mother and daughter went to sleep feeling truly at home. 6 months had passed since Emma's return to Seattle, and the spring afternoon sun filtered through the windows of Meadowbrook Elementary School's gymnasium, where the annual science fair was in full swing. Emma stood beside her display booth, wearing a simple blue dress and an expression of nervous excitement as families and community members examined the student projects that filled the large space. Her exhibit featured a working model of a hybrid engine system, complete with detailed explanations of how electric and gasoline power sources could work together to reduce environmental impact. The project represented months of research, design, and careful construction, combining her mechanical intuition with newly acquired knowledge about sustainable technology. "This is remarkable work for someone your age," said Dr. Patricia Williams, a professor from Oregon State University who was serving as one of the science fair judges. "Did you have help from adults with the technical aspects?" Emma shook her head, her confidence grown stronger through months of encouragement and genuine intellectual challenge. "I designed it myself, but I had lots of people to ask questions when I got stuck. My friend Jake in Meadowbrook helped me understand some of the electrical components, and my mom helped me research environmental impact studies." Victoria stood nearby, watching her daughter explain complex engineering principles to impressed adults with a mixture of pride and amazement. Emma's easy confidence and articulate explanations reflected not just intellectual growth, but emotional healing that had taken months of patient work to achieve. "Emma, your presentation skills are excellent," Dr. Williams continued. "Have you considered entering your project in the state science competition?" Emma's eyes lit up with possibility. "Could I really do that? I mean, would other kids my age be working on projects this complex?" "Some would, and some wouldn't," Dr. Williams replied honestly. "But what matters is the quality of your thinking and your ability to communicate your ideas clearly. You demonstrate both beautifully." Sophia appeared at Emma's side, having spent the morning helping with setup and providing moral support. "She's been working on this project every weekend when she visits Meadowbrook. Dad says it's the most sophisticated student work he's ever seen." Emma beamed at her friend's praise, then noticed a familiar figure approaching through the crowd. Jake Fisher walked toward them with his characteristic easy stride, followed by Mrs. Elena Booth, who was carrying a plate of her famous chocolate chip cookies. "There's our engineering genius," Mrs. Booth announced, setting down the cookies and enveloping Emma in a warm hug. "Jake told me about your hybrid engine project, but seeing it in person is even more impressive." Emma hugged Mrs. Booth tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon that always made her feel completely accepted and loved. "Thank you for coming. I was hoping you'd be here." Jake examined Emma's project with the professional interest of someone who had spent decades working with engines. "This is graduate-level thinking, Emma. The way you've integrated the electrical and mechanical systems shows real innovation." "I remember what you taught me about listening to what engines need," Emma replied. "This engine needs both power sources to work at its best, just like people need different kinds of support to thrive." Victoria approached the group, extending her hand to Mrs. Booth with the respectful warmth she had learned to show toward the people who had cared for Emma during her darkest period. "Mrs. Booth, thank you so much for making the trip. Emma has been talking about this science fair for weeks, and she specifically wanted you and Jake to see her project." Mrs. Booth studied Victoria with the same sharp-eyed assessment she had used 6 months earlier, but her expression was notably warmer. "You look well, dear. Both of you do. Emma's letters tell us that family life has been much happier lately." Victoria felt a flush of gratitude for Mrs. Booth's approval, recognizing how much the elderly woman's opinion meant to Emma. "We've learned a lot about what really matters. Emma's been an excellent teacher." Emma looked between the adults who had shaped her understanding of love and family, feeling grateful for the different gifts each had brought to her life. Jake had taught her to value her own capabilities, Mrs. Booth had shown her unconditional acceptance, and Victoria was learning to provide the emotional presence Emma had always needed. "I have an announcement," Emma said, drawing everyone's attention. "I've been thinking about what I want to do for my summer vacation, and I have an idea that involves all of you." Victoria raised an eyebrow with amused curiosity. "What kind of idea?" Emma took a deep breath, having rehearsed this proposal several times with Sophia. "I want to start a program that teaches mechanical skills to kids who might not otherwise have the opportunity. We could hold workshops in Meadowbrook during the summer and maybe expand to other small towns later." Jake's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "That's a wonderful idea, Emma. There are lots of kids who would benefit from learning basic maintenance and problem-solving skills. And I thought," Emma continued, looking directly at her mother, "that maybe your company could sponsor the program. Not to make money, but to help kids learn that they can build and fix things with their own hands." Victoria felt her heart swell with pride at her daughter's combination of technical vision and social consciousness. Emma had learned to think beyond her own interests toward broader community impact. "I think that's an excellent proposal," Victoria said carefully. "But I'd want to make sure the program is designed and run by people who understand both engineering education and child development." Emma nodded eagerly. "That's why I need all of you. Jake knows the technical stuff, Mrs. Booth understands kids, and you know how to organize complicated projects." Sophia bounced on her toes with excitement. "And I could help teach the younger kids. This is going to be amazing." Mrs. Booth dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, touched by Emma's desire to share her gifts with other children. "You have such a generous heart, dear one. Your grandfather would be so proud of the young woman you're becoming." The mention of Marcus Bailey brought the familiar pang of loss, but it was accompanied now by gratitude for the values he had instilled in Emma and the healing that had emerged from their shared grief. "I think Granddad would love the idea of kids learning to fix things together," Emma said softly. "He always said that understanding how things work helps you understand how people work, too." Victoria felt tears gathering as she realized how completely Emma had integrated her grandfather's wisdom with her own experiences of love and belonging. The little girl, who had once felt abandoned and misunderstood, had become someone capable of envisioning ways to help other children feel valued and capable. Dr. Williams, who had been listening to the conversation with obvious interest, stepped forward with a business card. Emma, I'd like to talk with your family about some additional opportunities. Oregon State has a summer program for gifted young scientists, and I think you'd benefit from working with other students who share your interests and abilities. Emma accepted the card but looked uncertain. Would I have to live at the university? I don't want to be away from my family for a whole summer. There are day programs available, Dr. Williams assured her. And given your innovative thinking, I suspect we could arrange something that accommodates your family's needs. Victoria felt a familiar surge of anxiety at the thought of Emma participating in an intensive academic program, but she forced herself to consider her daughter's perspective rather than her own fears. What do you think, Emma? Does that sound interesting to you? Emma considered the opportunity carefully, displaying the thoughtful decision-making skills she had developed through months of learning to advocate for her own needs. Could I do both? The university program and the workshop program? I don't see why not, Dr. Williams replied. In fact, your community workshop project might make an excellent research component for the university program. As the afternoon continued, Emma found herself surrounded by adults who were taking her ideas seriously and offering to help make them reality. The contrast with her previous experience of feeling dismissed and misunderstood was profound. Emma, Jake said as the science fair began winding down, I want you to know how proud I am of everything you've accomplished. Not just the technical work, but the way you've learned to ask for what you need and share your gifts with others. Emma hugged Jake tightly, understanding that he was referring to more than just academic achievement. Thank you for teaching me that my ideas matter. That changed everything. Victoria watched the exchange with deep gratitude for the man who had provided her daughter with crucial support during the most difficult period of both their lives. Jake's belief in Emma's worth had been fundamental to her healing and growth. As families began packing up their projects and heading home, Emma stood in the middle of the gymnasium, surrounded by the evidence of her intellectual growth and emotional healing. The hybrid engine model represented not just technical innovation, but her own integration of multiple sources of love and support. Ready to go home? Victoria asked, beginning to gather Emma's materials. Emma nodded, then looked around the familiar space one more time. Mom, do you ever think about how different things would be if I hadn't run away? Victoria paused in her packing, considering the profound implications of Emma's question, sometimes. But then I realized that everything that happened led us to where we are now, and I can't imagine being happier than we are today. Emma smiled, satisfied with her mother's answer. I think everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to happen. I needed to learn that I was worth fighting for. And you needed to learn what really matters in a family. As they loaded Emma's project into Victoria's car, both mother and daughter reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment of genuine happiness and mutual understanding. The little girl who had fixed a stranger's Porsche with remarkable mechanical skills had ultimately fixed something far more important: a family's capacity for authentic love, honest communication, and shared purpose. The drive back to Seattle was filled with excited planning for summer programs, workshop designs, and visits to Meadowbrook. Emma chattered about her ideas while Victoria listened with the kind of patient attention she had learned was more valuable than any expensive gift or professional opportunity. In the months ahead, Emma would indeed participate in both the university program and the community workshops, developing her technical skills while learning to mentor younger children. Victoria would discover that supporting her daughter's passions brought more satisfaction than any corporate achievement, and their relationship would continue deepening through shared challenges and celebrations. But perhaps most importantly, Emma had learned that home wasn't a place but a feeling of being truly known and unconditionally loved. Whether in the sophisticated comfort of her Seattle bedroom or the modest warmth of Fisher's Auto Repair, she carried that sense of belonging with her wherever she went. The story of how a little girl's mechanical genius had reunited a fractured family was far from over, but the foundation had been laid for a lifetime of authentic connection, mutual respect, and a shared purpose. In fixing that stranger's Porsche on a quiet street in Meadowbrook, Emma had set in motion a series of events that would continue rippling outward, touching lives and healing hearts in ways none of them could have imagined. As they drove through the Oregon countryside toward home, both Emma and Victoria understood that they had found something more precious than money or fame or professional success. They had found each other again, and this time they were determined never to let go. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoy this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch, and don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.